My dad is a Yandra. After he forcibly took my mom and had me, she ran away. My dad blamed me for not keeping her and despised me to the core. When I realized I had transmigrated into a 4-year-old girl, I was vigorously pulling a little boy's hair. He was covering his head, wailing loudly, and screaming at me to let go. I obediently let go, and he fell to the ground with a thud, seemingly crying even harder. Jenny, you're so mean. No wonder you don't have a mom. Your mom left you because you're a bad kid. The little boy shouted this sentence, and the original host's memories surfaced in my mind. The original host's father was a Yandra who forced her mother into marriage and having children. Her mother couldn't accept this life and secretly left the James family when she was 2 years old, vanishing without a trace ever since. Her father, George James, believed she was a useless child who couldn't keep her mother around, and from then on, he despised her completely, neglecting and ignoring her. The reason she pulled the little boy's hair today was because she had rejected his invitation, and the boy, in a fit of anger and embarrassment, called her an unwanted child by her mother. Looking at the clump of hair in my hand and the bald patch on the boy's head, I awkwardly tried to put the hair back. Stop crying, look, it's growing back already. He only cried even louder. Both the little boy and I had our parents called in. The boy's mother arrived first. Seeing her precious son with a bald patch on his head, she was so angry that she reached out to grab my braid. Luckily, I reacted quickly and hid behind the teacher. I wasn't worried about any consequences since the little boy was at fault first, and most likely, it would be George James's assistant or Aunt Lisa, who took care of the original host, handling the matter. However, to my surprise, the original host's cheap father, oh no. Now my cheap father, actually came in person. He looked very young, at most around 30 years old, dressed in a black suit, extremely composed, and even more charming than a celebrity. The only thing was his somewhat gloomy demeanor, making him seem like someone not easy to talk to. I stared at him in stunned silence for a moment, unsure how to react. The teacher also seemed to be seeing him for the first time and stammered, "Excuse me, are you Jenny's father?" George James gave a curt nod, frowning as he looked at me. Before he could say anything, the little boy's mother stepped forward to confront him. "George, I'll get straight to the point. Your daughter did this to my son's hair. What do you plan to do about it?" My cheap dad glanced at the little boy's head and said to me in a commanding tone, "Apologize." I was displeased. On what grounds? He was clearly the one at fault first. At my backtalk, George James furrowed his brows, probably not expecting his always obedient and well-behaved daughter to defy him one day. Seeing his displeasure, his assistant Tom behind him quickly put on a smile. "Mr. George, I think we should first ask Jenny why she hit someone. Jenny is very well behaved, not the kind of child who would hit others without reason." "There's nothing to ask," George James interrupted his assistant, glanced impatiently at the time, and then stared at me. "I don't have time to listen to these useless details. If you don't want to apologize," he turned his gaze to the mother and son, "you'll be at their mercy." His attitude towards me made everyone around pause for a moment. Fortunately, I'm not the real original owner and had mentally prepared in advance, so I didn't have much emotional fluctuation. If it were the real original owner, she would probably be devastated right now. In the original owner's setting, she deeply loved her father. The teacher quickly stepped in to mediate. "George, please don't be upset. The reason Jenny acted this way is because Peter said she doesn't have a mother first. Isn't he right?" George James continued to stare at me, expressionless, his voice icy. "Aren't you just the child your mother didn't want?" As soon as the words fell, the room plunged into an eerie silence. I'm not surprised by his words, nor will I cry like the original owner did. I'll just pretend to be innocent and say to him with a smile, "Dad, Mom doesn't want me. And she doesn't want you either." I seem to have hit George James's sore spot. He glared at me like an angry bull, panting heavily for a long time before turning and leaving without a word. I clicked my tongue, thinking this so-called father of mine was nothing special. After he left, his assistant Tom stayed behind to handle the matter. The little boy's mother didn't mind anymore and even overflowed with sympathy, comforting me not to be upset, saying my father wasn't fit to be one in the first place. I silently expressed my support in my heart. Seeing that she wouldn't pester further, Assistant Tom compensated me and sent me home by taxi. I pondered how I should live my life from now on. According to the original plot, I was just a minor character, while the true female lead was the daughter adopted by George James. After arriving at the James family, she not only received the paternal love the original owner never had, But the family's resources gradually shifted toward her as well. Even the boy she liked also fell for her. Later, due to repeated conflicts between the original owner and the female lead, she was heartlessly sent abroad by George James and met with an accidental death overseas. The female lead smoothly inherited the James group and lived happily ever after with the male lead. Sigh, having such a father is truly unfortunate. After much deliberation, I decided to find a way to squeeze money out of George James. Once the female lead arrives at the James family at the age of 13, I'll take the money and flee to my birth mother. The nanny taking care of me has a card, and George James deposits $300,000 into it every month as my fixed expenses, but the card's owner is still George James, so I thought, when I'm a bit older, I'll buy some luxury items that retain their value, sell them, and then run away. Ever since that unpleasant parting at the kindergarten with George James, our relationship has become extremely strained. George James doesn't usually come home. In the past, every time he returned, the original owner would eagerly fetch his slippers, fuss over him with excessive concern, and even wake up early to prepare simple love-filled breakfasts for him. If he didn't come back, she would miss him so much that she'd secretly cry late at night, but he would always coldly push her away. Now when he comes back, I either treat him like air, continue watching my cartoons, or retreat to my room to draw. Basically, I avoid talking to him whenever possible. I can't be bothered to do that kind of thing where you're all warm and friendly but get the cold shoulder in return. What I need to do now is fully enjoy the feeling of being a wealthy heiress. I'm still young, and there's no way I could spend $300,000 a month. The money in the card is just sitting there for George James, so it might as well be spent by his wonderful daughter. So I dragged the nanny along on a shopping spree, buying everything I fancied without hesitation. I returned home carrying numerous bags and saw George James, who hadn't been home for a long time, sitting on the sofa. We stared at each other for a while before he spoke first. "Won't you call me Dad when you see me?" His initiative this time surprised me a bit, because usually we both act as if we don't see each other. After all, he's the one who provides for me. Since he wants to hear it, I'll call him that. "Dad," I called out emotionlessly, told the aunt I was going back to my room first, and walked towards my room carrying all the bags. "Stop," he suddenly called out to me for some inexplicable reason, and only then did I notice how exhausted he looked, reeking of alcohol. "Jenny, do you know what day it is today?" I shook my head honestly. "I don't know." He staggered over to me, snatched the package from my hands, tore them open one by one, and threw them to the ground. "Today is the day your mother left me. Instead of staying home to reflect on yourself, you still have the mind to buy all this useless junk." I was baffled. Why should I reflect on myself? I hadn't done anything wrong. The nanny seemed used to this. She sighed and tried to pull me away. I broke free from the aunt's hand, walked up to George James, and spoke to him earnestly. "Dad, Mom left because of you, not because of me." George James staggered slightly, his eyes turning red, his voice hoarse. "You're lying. It's your fault. You couldn't keep her." I was about to say something else when suddenly, with a thud, he collapsed to the ground, startling both me and the auntie. "Is this some kind of scam?" The auntie called for a doctor, who said he had fainted from excessive grief and would be fine after some rest. The doctor advised the auntie to pay more attention to his emotional state, and that was when I learned he had been relying on sleeping pills to fall asleep ever since Mom left. I was shocked. I never realized someone could grieve to such an extent over another person's departure. The aunt sighed again. "This is a matter of the heart. No one can help him except Miss Chang. Even Jenny can't heal him. It's already good that he doesn't take his anger out on Jenny." There were a few times. The aunt glanced at me and lowered her voice. "A few times. I even saw him wanting to commit suicide." I still heard those two words and stared in disbelief at the gaunt man on the bed. I remember the original book mentioning that his wife's departure made him live like a walking corpse. He couldn't bear her absence, yet he couldn't find her. Alas, the hateful always have their pitiable side. After all, he's my bread and butter. Even if I could inherit his wealth after his death, I'm only 4 years old. Whether I could keep it is another matter entirely. I decided to take care of him a little out of humanitarianism, though taking care mostly meant lying on the couch in my room, watching idle dramas on my tablet with a silly grin, until I dozed off without even realizing it. When I woke up, it was already dusk. Groggily sitting up, I noticed a blanket covering me. I turned to look at George James. He was already awake, sitting on the bed and typing on his laptop. "Did you cover me with the blanket?" I asked him sweetly. He didn't respond, so I took his silence as confirmation. Still has some conscience. I folded the blanket neatly and placed it by his bedside. Thank you. George James glanced at me before lowering his eyes. Have you taken your medicine, Dad? I asked again. He grunted in response, like a block of wood. How boring. I didn't feel like taking care of him anymore either. After saying, you go ahead with your work, I toddled off on my short little legs. Jenny, I had just struggled to open the door when George James suddenly called out to me, I'll have Tom buy you new replacements for all the things I broke. Such an unexpected windfall. Of course I wouldn't refuse. Okay, thank you, Jenny. Just as I was about to leave, he called me back again. Is there anything else, Dad? I turned around like a robot. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but ultimately remained silent. It's nothing. All right, then I'll be going. I turned and walked away, so I didn't see the apologetic look in his eyes. From that day on, George James's attitude toward me improved slightly. Occasionally, he would even initiate conversations and show some concern for me. I remained polite to him, given that he played a significant role in the original protagonist's tragic fate. Being able to interact with him calmly was already the best I could do. Some time later, George James actually brought me a gift, a pink gemstone necklace. Do you like it? He asked. Yes, thank you, Dad. I nodded, putting the necklace back in the box, then continued drawing. George James, however, frowned, pursing his lips as if wanting to say something but hesitating. Jenny, why don't you try it on? The aunt noticed something and quickly spoke up. Without looking up, I said, I'm drawing. How about trying it on first before drawing? The aunt picked up the necklace, ready to put it around my neck. If you don't like it, just throw it away. George James abruptly interrupted Aunt Lisa and turned to leave, his retreating figure seemingly carrying a faint trace of resentment. After he left, Aunt Lisa asked me regretfully, Jenny, didn't you always want your father's attention before? Now that he not only cares about you but also gives you gifts, why aren't you as enthusiastic as before? I stopped painting, propping my chin with an innocent expression, because I also blame him for driving Mom away, making me a child that Mom didn't want. The aunt was silent for a long time before pulling me into her arms. Jenny, your mom didn't abandon you. George James and I returned to our previous way of interacting, treating each other like air. I went to school and came home as usual, being a good 4-year-old child, to be honest. It was quite enjoyable. No need to hustle for a living, no worries about going hungry, and no need to think about anything. All I had to do was act a little more childish, but even though I tried my best to play the part, the teacher quickly noticed the change in me. She called George James and told him that I had become quiet lately, no longer playing with other kids, always standing alone as if lost in thought, which worried the teachers. But I'm really wronged. As an adult who had already lived to 18 in my previous life, having to play games like Ultraman fighting monsters, I'm Peppa and you're George, or I'm the mom and you're the daughter, with a bunch of 4-year-olds every day is truly exhausting. After school, George James surprisingly came to the kindergarten. We stared at each other for a few seconds before he was called aside by the teacher, leaving me to chat with the assistant. Jenny, I also feel like you've changed, acting like a little adult. Assistant Tom patted my head. What does little adult mean? I pretended to be naive. A little adult means even though you're still very young, just 4 years old, you're already as mature and sensible as us grown-ups, quite different from the crying, laughing you before. Maybe I've grown up, I answered seriously. Tom couldn't help but laugh. How old are you? Are you older than me? Older than your dad, older than Aunt Lisa. I stomped my foot. Humph, just you wait, I'll grow up eventually, and when I do, I'll be better than all of you. Jenny, before I could finish speaking, I was interrupted by the sudden appearance of George James. He glanced at me, then at Tom who was chatting and laughing with me, pursed his lips slightly, looking somewhat displeased. He was unhappy, and so was I, when he said he would take me home. I reluctantly waved at Tom and whispered in a voice we could both hear, Uncle Tom, I wish you were my dad. The air fell silent for a moment. George James showed no extra reaction on his face. Tom quickly explained in embarrassment. Mr. George, kids say the darndest things. Don't take it seriously, really don't. George James gave a non-committal hum and pulled me into the car by my sleeve. The atmosphere inside the car was somewhat stifling. This was always the case whenever I spent time with this so-called father of mine. Why did you want Tom to be your dad? He suddenly spoke, and you could tell he was asking somewhat hesitantly, because he's very interesting. I didn't know why he was asking these things and answered casually. He was silent for a few seconds before asking again. Do you like interesting, Dad? Not exactly. I like rich and generous dads. I'm not deliberately flattering him. I genuinely prefer having wealthy parents, whether it's a dad or mom. In my past life, I was an orphan who grew up in an institution, dropped out of school early, and had to work odd jobs, so having a rich and generous parent, even without love, is infinitely better than nothing. Visibly, George James curled his lips slightly and replied indifferently, pretending not to care. Is that so? When the next month's money was deposited into the account, the aunt was shocked to find an extra 300,000. What's up with your dad? Why did he suddenly add so much money? I answered calmly. He probably took it personally. It might be because George James thought my words were directed at him. He's been acting like a madman lately, sending me expensive gifts every few days and occasionally picking me up from school. I really wanted to refuse him, but those gifts are so valuable. I just couldn't say no. Gifts are fine. But picking me up from school is really unnecessary. I feel very comfortable with Aunt Lisa, but there's an indescribable awkwardness when I'm with George James. Dad, you must be very busy with work. You don't need to come pick me up often. George James remained silent for a long while. Who do you want to come pick you up? Uncle Tom or Aunt Lisa would both be fine. After saying this, I felt the atmosphere in the car grow even colder. They won't be picking you up anymore. Why not? I felt puzzled. After a long time, his icy voice came through. Because you're my daughter, not theirs. I was full of questions and really wanted to retort. Then why didn't you treat me as your daughter before? But then I remembered I'm only 4 years old now. So I held back and let out a light, sarcastic hum. George James seemed to sense it too, glancing at me through the rearview mirror before ultimately saying nothing. I think he must have been feeling the contrast recently. Or perhaps his conscience was awakened after being lectured by a teacher. That's why he's acting this way. I lean more toward the former explanation. People are always like this. They only realize what they had once it's gone. After returning home, I planned to work on the parent-child craft assignment with the nanny. She clearly wasn't very skilled at crafts, and I didn't dare to show too much talent either. So we struggled for a long time without making much progress. Let me do it. George James suddenly appeared, reaching out to take the materials from the nanny's hands. Looking at the unrecognizable caterpillar in my hands, he couldn't help but smirk. Your mother is a designer. How come you didn't inherit? Realizing what he had said, he silently helped me finish the craft. Jenny, look how amazing your dad is. Hurry up and praise him. The aunt tried to ease the tension between us. I pursed my lips, somewhat reluctant. Accompanying your child for one craft session makes you amazing. Being a dad is way too easy. Forget it. Seeing that I remained silent, George James handed me the items and stood up to leave, his retreating figure seeming somewhat desolate. Auntie sighed with regret again. Jenny, your father has been so good to you lately. Why won't you even praise him a little? That's just what he's supposed to do. Now that he's doing his duty, you expect me to praise him for it. What kind of logic is that? The aunt was amused by my serious expression, quite knowledgeable for someone so young. Can't blame him though. He just couldn't figure things out before. When people can't make sense of things, they tend to obsess and do extreme things. He loved your mother too much, just used the wrong approach. One wrong step led to another. Back when your mother was around, he treated you so well. He would hold you in his arms every day, and even the slightest cry from you would break his heart. When you fell ill, he would worry so much he couldn't sleep. I think he's already realized his mistake. I pouted, feeling a lump in my throat. It must be the original host's influence making me so sentimental, but why do these memories feel so real, as if I've truly experienced his affection for me? I was clearly an orphan. I never thought I'd encounter kidnapping in my lifetime. That weekend, Aunt Lisa had to return to her hometown for some business. And George James happened to be going on a business trip, so he had Aunt Lisa take me along. Who would have thought that as soon as we arrived at the rural hometown, a van suddenly stopped in front of us. Without a word, 2 burly men snatched me from Aunt Lisa's hands and openly took me away. In the car, besides the 2 burly men, there was also a little boy about my age. He was tied up with ropes, looking just as bewildered as I was, probably also just kidnapped into the car. The kidnappers tied me up too. After several days of traveling, they finally took us to an unfamiliar house, gave us some food, and locked us up separately. These 2 kids look so delicate, they'll definitely fetch a good price. Let's go have a drink to celebrate. Hearing the sound of them leaving, I struggled to sit up from the bed. The two burly men probably thought we were too young to have the ability to escape. So they only tied up our hands and feet. Seeing that we were obedient, they didn't bother to gag us. I had to find a way to escape. I looked at the little boy beside me. I'll help you untie the rope, and you help me untie mine, understand? He nodded, surprisingly obedient. After much biting and pulling, we finally managed to untie each other's ropes. I struggled to open the window and found that we were in an old residential building. It was already late at night, and the place was deserted. We weren't on a very high floor, just the second story, but jumping down would definitely result in injuries. I grabbed the bedsheet and threw it out the window. Not enough. The little boy seemed to realize what I was doing and started tugging at the bed cover. By the time we finished all the preparations, we were both drenched in sweat. Dare you go down? I asked the little boy. He glanced downstairs, then at the knot tied to the cabinet, swallowed hard, and nodded. One of life's great blessings is having teammates who aren't utterly useless. If he had kept crying and making a fuss, I might have really abandoned him. I went first, slowly sliding down the rope. Truth be told, I was scared too, but my will to survive was astonishingly strong at that moment. The little boy had just slid halfway down when suddenly there was a loud shout. They're running away. Realizing the two burly men had returned, I jolted and shouted at the little boy, hurry up. Surprisingly calm, the little boy pulled me along and ran after sliding down. Our two little short legs definitely couldn't outrun two adults. The little boy saw a green trash can in the alley, pushed it over, and told me to hide inside. What about you? I'll go distract them first. Once they're gone, you hurry and find someone to help. The situation was urgent, and I didn't have time to hesitate. I hid inside the trash can. After the little boy helped me upright the can, I heard the sound of him running away, followed by the shouts of the burly men. Finally, the night slowly returned to silence. By the time I managed to find help, the little boy and the two burly men had already disappeared. We were in a small town, and the surveillance system where we were hiding was out of order. The police had no choice but to contact my father while searching for the little boy. My heart sank to the bottom. George James arrived the very next day. It was the first time I'd seen him looking so haggard, unshaven with bloodshot eyes, his hands trembling slightly when he saw me. Before he could even embrace me, I threw myself into his arms and burst into tears. The tension that had been building over the past few days completely shattered in that moment. Daddy, woo-woo, I truly needed someone to comfort me right now. I could feel George James's body stiffen for a moment before he gently pulled me into his embrace. Holding me tighter and tighter, Aunt Lisa was sobbing uncontrollably beside us. Jenny, if you had really gone missing, I would have carried the guilt for the rest of my life. This was also the reason I fought so hard to escape. Auntie was so kind, and I couldn't bear the thought of her carrying the burden of losing me forever. The police likely recounted my ordeal over the past few days to George James, who held me tightly the entire time, refusing to let go. Daddy. The brother who was caught with me hasn't been found yet. It was because he distracted the bad guys that I got the chance to call the police. George James has extensive connections and resources, so I want to ask for his help in the search. George James nodded and told me not to worry. The next day, the incident made headlines. Finally, the effort paid off, and the little boy was found a week after his disappearance. He had indeed been recaptured by the burly man, who beat him before fleeing with him overnight. After hiding for several days, they were found just as the man was about to sell him. The little boy was taken to the hospital for treatment, fortunately with no serious injuries. I visited him at the hospital, exchanged names with him, and learned that his name is Simon and he is 5 years old. His father passed away from illness when he was very young. His mother has since remarried, and now he lives with his grandmother. He was captured just before I was. George James covered his living expenses during his school years as a gesture of gratitude. The two traffickers were also punished, and from then on, he and I returned to our respective lives. George James is acting up again. He won't let me attend kindergarten and insists on hiring a tutor for me at home. Not only did he not let me go to kindergarten, but he also told the nanny to keep an eye on me at all times. I had to report to him wherever I went outside, and I couldn't leave the house without his company. Daddy, why won't you let me go to kindergarten? Why won't you let me go out? I suspect his Yandra tendencies are acting up again. Ever since that incident happened, my relationship with George James has improved a lot. It's too dangerous outside. He didn't say much, but his tone had softened considerably. But that was just an accident. There's no need to be like this over one accident. Now I have to get his permission just to go out. And I can't even indulge in impulse shopping anymore. George James answered me very seriously. I don't want to experience such an accident a second time, Dad. I tried to persuade him, but he remained unmoved. I must make him realize that this is wrong. Daddy, I want to go to kindergarten. I want to play with the other kids. I walked to the study and found George James. George James was flipping through a photo album, but he closed it when he saw me coming. I can invite them over to our house to play. I glared at him angrily for a moment, then pointed at the photo album and asked, "Is that Mom inside?" George James remained silent for a long time before finally uttering a faint "I want to take a look. I don't know what my mother looks like, nor do I have any memories of her." George James hesitated for a moment, then pulled me close to him and placed the photo album in front of me. The photo album contains many pictures. From high school to college, then marriage and childbirth, like a chronicle of her life. The woman was very beautiful, with eyes that curved into crescents when she smiled, making it impossible not to feel warmth from her expression. But these smiles disappeared after she got married. She was always gloomy and full of sorrow, and even her smile when looking at her child carried an indescribable bitterness. I could sense that she was living in misery after marriage, and for some reason, she felt familiar to me, as if I'd seen her before. "Dad, didn't you used to keep Mom from going out too?" George James raised an eyebrow, surprised that I knew about these matters. "Daddy is protecting Mommy." I closed the photo album and told him seriously, "You're wrong about this. What you're doing isn't protection at all. You're just afraid Mom will leave you." George James frowned, his expression terrifyingly cold. "Who told you this, Aunt Lisa? Isn't this common knowledge? There's tons of gossip about our family online, saying you're overly possessive, that you take what you want by force, calling you a gutter man. I learned all this from videos. I wasn't lying. The James family is too well known. You can find stuff about them everywhere online. Jenny is still young. She doesn't understand these things yet." He tugged at the corner of his lips, struggling to control his tone. "I thought if it weren't for fear of ruining the fragile peace we just managed to establish, George James would probably have kicked me out right then. I'm not a child anymore. I had to make him understand that this twisted love was wrong. Otherwise I was terrified he might transfer all those feelings he had for Mom onto me in the future. Dad, if one day someone locked you up and wouldn't let you leave the house, could you accept that?" George James smiled. "I won't give anyone such an opportunity." I was about to say something more when George James interrupted me. "All right, Jenny, Daddy still has work to do. You should go to bed now." I was so angry I puffed up like a pufferfish. This old man, no wonder he doesn't have a wife. I started a one-sided Cold War with George James. He was very distressed, not understanding what was wrong with me. He asked the housekeeper to inquire, but I told him to figure it out himself. George James couldn't figure it out and began trying various ways to cheer me up, even cooking for me personally. I have to admit his cooking skills pleased me. "Did you used to cook for Mom too?" I couldn't help but ask him, seeing that I was finally talking to him. George James nodded with a smile. "To be honest, he's really handsome when he smiles." "Dad, I love you very much." My sudden confession made George James pause slightly while eating. "Dad, do you love me?" I asked again. George James looked at me and gave a soft, "Dad, I have a wish. I hope you don't work and stay home with me every day, but I know that's impossible, so I didn't say anything because I love you and don't want to make things hard for you. So, Dad, if you love me, please listen to my thoughts. I want to go to kindergarten, make friends, and go out to play. I don't like staying at home every day. Can I, Dad? In my previous life, I was an orphan and never attended kindergarten, so I cherish this second chance dearly." George James lowered his eyes in silence, and I knew he was struggling. I stepped forward and hugged him. "Dad, I may not know why you've been treating me better and better, but I think we both treasure this relationship deeply. Let's work hard to maintain it, okay?" After a long while, George James sighed and amusedly patted my head. "Where did you learn all these words? You sound so convincing when you say them." He paused for a moment. "I promise you, I learned it online." Having gotten the answer I wanted, my mood improved. He held me in his arms and lightly tapped my nose. "Don't waste your time on such useless things in the future." I nodded with a smile. "Jenny, your dad had a dream some time ago, on the day I fainted." George James's expression suddenly turned serious. "What dream?" "I dreamed of a time far in the future, when you had already grown up. I dreamed that Dad adopted a strange girl. Dreamed of you crying and asking me why I disliked you but loved that adopted daughter. Dreamed of me sending you abroad for her sake. Dreamed of you dying overseas. But I don't know why. I couldn't control my actions. I clearly didn't want to adopt that girl, nor did I want to send you abroad. I clearly loved you so much. Yet somehow, I always ended up turning a blind eye to you. I did blame you for your mother's departure. But the person I blamed more was myself, at this point. His voice grew choked with emotion. After you died, I lost all will to live. I jumped from the building, only to wake up and realize it was all a dream. He nuzzled his head against mine. Jenny, thank goodness you're still alive. I opened my mouth to speak, only to find my face already drenched in tears. I seemed to have forgotten a piece of memory. That must have been when I had just dropped out of school. I worked day and night, exhausted to the point of tears every day. Back then, I kept thinking how nice it would be if I had parents. I wouldn't have had to drop out of school early to work, nor endure the bullying from my boss. So, novels became my emotional refuge. That must have been when I accidentally came across an unfinished novel. The female lead was named Nina, and the second male lead was called George James. The female lead originally had someone she liked, but the second male lead forced her into marriage, and they even had a child. The author stopped updating right after writing about the female lead giving birth. I left a comment asking why the author stopped updating, but who knew I'd wake up as a baby? I have parents. My dad is named George James, and my mom is Nina. Dad loves me dearly, holding me in his arms every day, unable to put me down. He named me Jenny, inspired by the character from Mom's name. He said today his body is with me, but his heart is with her, forming Mom's longing. I like this name. If it weren't for my need to nurse, he would probably take me to work with him, but my mother's eyes always fill with sorrow when she looks at me. Sometimes she would gently hold me in her arms to comfort me, and other times she wouldn't even want to touch me, even breaking down and yelling at me to get out. I tried to please her, often smiling at her, not crying or making a fuss, and even calling her Mommy first. I wanted to make her happy. This was the mother I had worked so hard to have. But the good times didn't last. She still left when I was 2 years old. I don't blame her. She didn't like my father, didn't like this family. Staying would only drain her life. She was my mother, and I supported her in everything. Without Mom, I still have Dad, don't I? Dad loves me very much. Yet Mom's departure seemed to drain all his strength. He hates me, hates himself, hates everything. I wanted to heal him, to help him move on. Sometimes it seemed like I was about to succeed. But then he would suddenly change, telling me to stay away, hating my face that looks just like his. And so we spent 10 years in this on and off relationship. When I was 13, my father adopted a girl named Bella. She grew up in an orphanage and looked very much like my mother. I heard that the moment Dad saw her, he decided to bring her home. When she first arrived, I comforted myself by thinking Dad just missed Mom too much, and that it was nothing. But later, Dad's favoritism toward her became increasingly obvious, and my feelings for her shifted from initial fondness to eventual dislike. I hated it. I hated it so much. I hate how much she resembles Mom, and I hate that I don't look like Mom at all. I envy her, even though she's done nothing wrong. My jealousy toward her grew increasingly intense. I began opposing her at every turn, ruining her dress on her birthday, stealing her homework to get her scolded by the teacher, putting chilly water in her cup, and soaking her bedding. I even snooped through her diary and learned she had a crush on the class monitor who always helped her. So I deliberately wrote a love letter to that boy to make her jealous. That guy said he would never like me in this lifetime. I couldn't care less who he likes. I just want to make Bella unhappy. I loathe this version of myself, but I simply can't control my actions. Later, because of that guy, Bella and I had a huge fight at home. That guy got locked in the equipment room, and she thought I was the one who did it. We were in the middle of a heated argument when my father came home. Seeing me push Bella, he immediately decided to send me abroad. I cried and asked him why he treated me this way. Wasn't I his biological daughter? Why did he only favor that adopted girl over me? I saw his expression waver for a moment, and his face softened slightly. He seemed like he wanted to wipe my tears, but as soon as he raised his hand, his gaze turned sharp again. You're going abroad tomorrow. He finished speaking and left, not even glancing at me on the day I departed. I lived abroad for 2 years, only to encounter a shooting on my way home and die in a foreign land. When I opened my eyes again, I was still in the factory dormitory, staring at the novel on my phone, thinking it was all a dream. Turns out, I had already transmigrated into a book once before. I think I figured out what's going on. Not long after my first transmigration into the book, the author who had stopped updating suddenly started writing a sequel, changing the female lead to Bella while reducing Jenny's role to cannon fodder. When I woke up, I thought it was all just a dream and forgot everything. No wonder I felt inexplicably familiar with Jenny's character and inexplicably angry about her ending when I saw this novel again. George James saw me crying and tenderly wiped my tears for me. "What's wrong, Jenny? Did Daddy do something wrong again?" I shook my head. "Daddy, I love you very much. You must love me very, very much in the future too. Let's make up for those regrets together." George James smiled with affection. "I will." Time flew by quickly, and I was already 13 years old. In my first year of junior high, a lot has happened over the years. For instance, Assistant Tom got married and had a pair of twins, a boy and a girl. George James said he liked being a dad, and now he's got his fill of it. For example, Simon, who was kidnapped with me when we were kids, ended up attending the same school as me. We were even desk mates. He's still as eerily calm as he was in childhood, but he treats me quite well. For example, George James occasionally gets jealous of the aunt, thinking I'm closer to her than to him. Honestly, I feel like his Yandra tendencies need to flare up from time to time, otherwise, it wouldn't do justice to his character setting. Another really funny thing was when the media once caught George James taking me out alone. I wanted to eat spicy strips, but he disagreed. And there were photos of him flustered while trying to comfort me. He went from being jokingly called the sewer guy by netizens to becoming the spicy strip dad. Life has been generally happy overall. However, this year is a bit special. According to the original book's plot, George James would see the female lead, who looks strikingly similar to Nina, at a charity event this year and bring her home to adopt her, based on my childhood plan. The day the female lead arrives at the James family will be the day I run off to join my mom. Over the years, I've saved quite a bit of money, but I never tried to find Nina. She left so decisively back then, and I think she wouldn't want me to disturb her, so this plan has been put on hold for now. I've made up my mind. Whether the female lead comes to the James family or not this time, I'll find a way to ensure she has a good life. After all, she really hasn't done anything wrong. When I attended the charity event with George James and saw Bella James again, no, she's still called Bella Hudson now. When I saw Bella Hudson again, it was hard not to be shocked. She was practically a miniature version of my mother. George James was clearly stunned too. He froze for 3 seconds before slowly regaining his composure, then averted his gaze and led me away. I was somewhat surprised. "Dad, don't you think that woman looks just like my mom?" I tentatively asked. George James smiled at me. "There is some resemblance, but that's nothing surprising. There are plenty of people in the world who look alike. For example, you look a lot like me." I did resemble George James. Almond-shaped eyes, a slightly arched nose, essentially a female version of him. "Dad, find her a good family to adopt." I clung to his arm, acting coquettish. George James is now completely obedient to me. "All right, I'll keep that in mind." He gently tapped my nose. "Jenny is so kind. Just like your mother." Under my desensitization training, he can now mention his mother quite naturally. I didn't respond to his words. To be honest, I'm not that kind-hearted either. I used to envy the female lead. Long ago, Bella Hudson was adopted by one of George James's friends. Their family had 3 sons, and the lady of the house had always wanted a daughter but couldn't have one, so she considered adopting. George James introduced the girls from the charity event, and the lady immediately took a liking to the beautiful Bella Hudson. Coincidentally, the male lead whom the female lead would marry in the future, the class monitor she would later have a crush on, was actually the second son of this family. The female lead is indeed the female lead. Fate never treats her unfairly. I followed the routine of going to school and spent 3 years of middle school bickering and playing around with Simon, though, most of the time, it was me doing the bickering and playing, while he watched my antics with a smile. After graduating from middle school, there was a graduation trip to a small island surrounded by the sea on all sides. George James was worried about me and insisted on coming along. Simon and I were catching crabs and building sandcastles by the shore while he watched us from a distance. Tom was with him too, talking on the phone with his twins, his face crinkling with laughter. I was building a sandcastle with Simon when I didn't notice a little girl, about 7 or 8 years old, coming up beside us. her dark, round eyes wide with curiosity. Big brother and sister, your castle is so big. Just as I was about to reply, a gentle voice spoke up. Cindy, remember to ask politely. I think it must be the little girl's mother. When I saw her face clearly, my mind went blank. Our eyes met, and for a fleeting moment, she seemed dazed too, but quickly regained her composure. Excuse me, my daughter would like to watch you build the sandcastle. Is that okay? She's very well behaved and won't disturb you. I lowered my eyes, unable to describe the mix of emotions in my heart. More than anything, it was disappointment. My mother, Nina, didn't recognize me, seeing that I remained silent. Nina thought I was unwilling and apologized before preparing to leave with her daughter. As I looked up and saw George James approaching, I quickly called out to stop her. Aunt Nina, let's talk alone. I grabbed her wrist and looked at Simon. Simon, help me stall my dad. Simon has always been my best partner and immediately went to stop George James. Nina, being pulled by me, didn't see George James. She asked me in surprise, little girl, do you know me? I didn't say anything, took her to a nearby cafe, and then sent a message to George James. Dad, wait for my message first. After a long while, he replied with a single word, okay. I felt relieved. If I could recognize my mother at a glance, how could he not? Little girl, you still haven't told me who you are. How do you know me? Nina still looks just like she did in the photo, gentle and beautiful, with eyes that crinkle when she smiles. I mustered my courage many times but still couldn't bring myself to say it, even seeing how happy she looked with her daughter in her arms. I thought maybe I should just let it go and not disturb her, but I really had a selfish wish to know if she ever thought of me. My name is Jenny. I said my name, lowering my head, not daring to look at her reaction. So it really is Jenny. After a long time, I finally heard her voice. I looked up in a daze and saw her eyes filled with tears. The last time I saw you was in a charity news report 3 years ago. You were wearing a simple short-sleeved shirt with a simple ponytail. So bright and sunny. At this point, she covered her mouth, choking back sobs. The moment I first saw you, I felt a sense of familiarity, but I didn't dare to believe it. You were so far away from me. How could you just appear before me like this? Hearing that she had been keeping up with news about me, my wildly beating heart gradually calmed down. This is enough. Just knowing that she had paid attention to me is enough. Auntie, don't cry. I handed her a tissue. I still didn't have the courage to call her Mom, and perhaps she didn't want her daughter to know she had an older sister either. Instead of taking the tissue, she grasped my hand. I thought I'd never have the chance to see you again in this lifetime. Jenny, are you refusing to call me Mom because you blame me? So she was willing to let me call her Mom. I don't blame you, Mom. I quickly called out to her. I've never blamed you. You didn't like my father. You weren't happy by his side. Leaving was the right choice. As your daughter, I'll always support whatever choice you make. Nina told me many things about those days. She said that when she saw how adorable I was, she almost resigned herself to her fate, but she couldn't accept it, couldn't bear being trapped in a gilded cage for life, playing the role of dutiful wife and mother. She had her own dreams, a career she wanted to pursue, and someone she loved, so she still left. With the help of her current partner, she changed her identity and came to this little-known island. At first, she always thought about finding a way to take me away. She was afraid I wouldn't be able to sleep from missing her, and also feared George James would take his anger out on her after she left. Later, when she learned I had been kidnapped, she almost decided to return, but her current partner stopped her, saying everything would be in vain if she went back. Later, when she saw the news about the spicy strip daddy incident, she realized that George James had taken good care of me. She let go of the past, married her current partner, and had a daughter. She named her Cindy, saying that we were the ones she missed the most. While she was saying this, I secretly called George James. Mom has moved on from the past, and I hope he can too. The other end of the phone was silent for a long time. Finally, Dad's voice came through. Nina, I wish you happiness. Mom and I turned our heads to find Dad standing not far outside the window. Mom smiled. Thank you for taking such good care of our daughter. I walked out of the cafe, waved one last time to Mom, and got into George James's car. In the end, they didn't say a word. Dad was the first to get into the car. He said if he kept watching, he was afraid he might regret it, regret letting her leave without doing anything. I watched as Mom slowly walked away with my little sister, and finally, a man hurriedly ran toward them. They held the little girl's hand and left together. The glow of the setting sun bathed them, and in the end, Mom turned her head, as if waving to us. Mom, be happy. I took Dad's hand. Dad, we'll be happy too. He smiled and nodded. After hearing the story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.